I suppose it's true that you always want what you can't have. So I've been thinking a lot about Christmas songs lately. And I was thinking that, as far as I can tell, Christmas songs come in roughly three categories. The first category is what we might call the holly jolly category. It's the songs that you hear walking through Walmart or Lowe's. Have a holly jolly Christmas, gonna rock around the Christmas tree. Some of the songs in our hymn book even fall in this category. Deck the halls with boughs of holly. Actually, I don't know if that one's in the hymn book. But then there are the slightly more religious songs. The second type of Christmas songs we might call the sweet little Jesus boy Christmas songs. The text of these reads like a children's book where each animal in the stable goes around telling their part in the birth of the baby. Songs like The Friendly Beasts and Away in the Manger. Isn't the child cute and cuddly? Those kinds of things. But then there's the third type of songs that make up the bulk of the Christmas songs that are in our hymn book. Things like Hark the Herald Angels Sing, O come all ye faithful, joy to the world. These we might categorize as celebrations of the incarnation, the coming of God to dwell in human flesh and likeness. Some of the deepest theology, some of the most beautiful truths about our faith are encapsulated in these songs. And it never ceases to amaze me how much people love these songs, in spite of the fact that they maybe don't understand everything that's being said there. I guess I'm thinking especially about, I was reflecting with my kids the other day about what was the best part of Christmas this year, because we couldn't do a lot of things that we often do. We couldn't go a lot of places. So we talked about what we did do and what we did enjoy. And many of us said that our favorite part of Christmas this year around the Gunby household was when my parents were over here Christmas Eve, and some of the people from the neighborhood came and stood on our porch or out in the yard, and my mom played these beautiful Christmas hymns, and we were inside and they were outside, and I passed around hymn books. And many people who are not necessarily a part of the church will sing to the top of their voice these songs that are right at the heart of what we believe as Christians. And they know them and they love them. So I thought today would be a wonderful time to reflect a little bit more about the treasures of these songs and how wonderful it is. Many of the songs that we're going to talk about today are a different way of saying and singing the truth that we find in the first chapter of John's Gospel, the one that we read at the Christmas Eve service, that says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life. The life was the light of all people. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son." It's a really interesting way to begin the gospel story. I mean, that's the beginning. A lot of stories start with once upon a time or something that draws the reader in. But John's gospel is unique. It's a little bit different than, say, Matthew and Luke, which also tell the story of Jesus's incarnation. Because John is less interested in giving us the facts or the details of what happened. And instead, he wants us to see that what happened in Jesus becoming a child is something that has been going on eternally in the life of God. So when Jesus heals the man by the pool of Siloam or breaks social custom to talk to the woman, the Samaritan woman at the well later in the gospel, when he changes water into wine in the early part of his ministry, all of these actions, John wants us to know, tell us something about the life of God, a life that is so abundant and wonderful that it overflows into our lives. So that's why he said, and what came was life. Furthermore, John says that even though the darkness does not comprehend the light and the life of Jesus Christ, the darkness still will not overcome it. That the joy and the forgiveness and the abundance of God's life with us cannot be altered in any way, no matter how bad things get. Not only that, but the light that reaches us in Jesus Christ comes into our lives from within. The Word became flesh and dwells among us, within us. And so we have one of those many beautiful songs that we usually sing every year. Of the Father's love begotten, ere the worlds began to be, He the Alpha and Omega, He the source, the ending, He. Of the things that are, that have been, and that future years shall see, evermore and evermore. Isn't that just so much better than reading it? Aren't there some truths that are just so beautiful and true and good that you just have to sing them? They have to be set to verse and music. There's something about the compression of that poetic verse and the lilt of a good melody that makes them come alive. Especially for us Methodist types who have always thought that genuinely true theology also has to be beautiful. And sometimes you can only say something by singing it together. And so we have another hymn that tells another one of the truths of John chapter 1. True God from true God, light from light eternal, as we sing in O Come All Ye Faithful. It's a super heavy thing to say, but I think it's worth reveling in for a moment. True God from true God, light from light eternal. Let's take a moment to just sink down into that. True God from true God. What does that mean? The author of O Come All Ye Faithful is saying that the one who comes to us, the God who comes to us in the person of Jesus Christ, has always wanted to do so. That this is truly God, nothing less than God, nothing merely human. The glory of God's humility in Jesus Christ is that He's God. That's what makes His humility stand out. He's truly God. The light that He is not some brief or mere shining. It is the light that has been shining since the dawn of creation. And that when that light comes to us, it's because that light, that warmth, that radiance of the character of God has always been shining on us. God is not just some grand old man who has been up in the sky far away from us. God, furthermore, doesn't have to be convinced to come down to us. We don't have to try really hard or pretend to be really good or make sure that we do a lot of religious stuff to get God convinced to come down and see us. God doesn't ensconce himself someplace other than where we are. God's not, sitting like a grumpy old man up in a bedroom in heaven somewhere, dragging his old beard out of bed. And in the person of Jesus, he puts on his human slippers and sloughs down to the human world begrudgingly. No. The truth of the scripture and the truth of our hymns is that God's being with us is not earned by our activity. But it is in fact, something about the way that God is all the time, light from light, eternal, since eternity. And that's why the hymn continues, light from light, eternal. When God's light flows into the world in Jesus, it doesn't diminish God at all. He can be truly God in the person of Jesus and still be God throughout the universe. God remains God. I think it's a beautiful image of this when we light the candles on Christmas Eve, the way that when you light one candle, the first candle is not diminished in the least. God gives what God is without being diminished. There is nothing in God that is damaged by giving his person and his character and his love to us. Because there has never been anything about God that didn't involve some way of some kind of giving, some way of being for and with others. It's who God is. And what's more, this has always been the way that it is. There was never a point at which God was not in relationship. From the very beginning, the giving that is at the heart of the Trinity was overflowing into the creation of all things. As we heard John say, all things came into being through him, and without him, not one thing came into being. The creative power that made the world is the same power, the same God that became flesh and made a home with us. But in order to come and make a home with us, Christ had to leave the glory of his home with the Father. We get another hymn that speaks of this reality. Mild he lays his glory by, born that we no more may die. What does it mean to say, mild, he lays his glory by? It means that because he's mild, meaning not assertive, not trying to get his own way all the time, he can, out of his own character and person, very naturally and easily lay his glory by. The way I would lay something on my desk, he just sets it to the side, focuses on it later. Even though he is the heaven-born Prince of Peace, the Son of Righteousness, he can put all of his shining, all of his glory on the back burner for us, for our sakes. Should be obvious, but the Jesus that we see in these truths, the Jesus that we see in the pages of Scripture, would have been very different if he was the kind of character that we meet in a Marvel comic book or one of these fantasy movies. He's no superhero. The incarnation wasn't a strange accident like the one that Spider-Man went through, where a human being undergoes some strange occurrence and through that occurrence takes on superhuman or divine power. No, with Jesus, it's exactly opposite of that. In the incarnation, divine power was traded for vulnerability, and control was given up for humility. And where it gets really interesting is that when Christ trades in that power for humility to become like us, it's in order that we won't merely be left with our vulnerability and humility and powerlessness. by coming to us in the form of a servant, by shedding his glory as of a father's only son to become meek and human and mild. He empowers us and can command us from within to be more like himself, so that the divine purpose and the divine power can work through us. And it works from us, not from without. He doesn't stand on high and just tell us what to do, but he comes with us and in us and through us and empowers us from within. So we can say that in Jesus, God enlarges our human capacity to do God's will. Hark the Herald Angels Sing has another lovely image of the way that human life is positively brimming with the divine life that Jesus has put within it. Not only that, but when Jesus put this human life, this divine life within the human life, he didn't do it begrudgingly. He did it because he was pleased, as the song says, pleased with us as man to dwell, Jesus our Emmanuel. Isn't that lovely? To think that when Jesus came to be with us, he was pleased to do it, and not because he was forced to do it by the necessity of our sin. You know, there are some theologies and sermons, unfortunately, that paint the picture of what's going on in the incarnation as though it was something that Jesus was forced to do by the Father, as though there were some conversation, again, far off up in heaven somewhere, where we often mistakenly think God is, that there was this conversation up there in heaven where God says, the Father says, okay, these people have gone and messed things up. And, the rules are the rules. And so, number 2, get your human clothes on. I want you to go down there and satisfy my wrath, whether you like it or not. That's not what the hymn says happened at all. Pleased with us. That is, when the God who created the light that makes the universe shine came to be with us in the fullness that was Jesus, he didn't come as an intruder or an ogre from the outside, imposing the divine will on us by force. Instead, the fullness of God's life that we encounter in the scripture is pleased to be with us, not because we're so great, but because God's life has always been overflowing into ours. Pleased with us in flesh to dwell, or as the old version says, pleased with man as man to dwell. God chose to be with us by being with us as we are in our humanity, as we have been truly created to be. Of course, that raises the question, we're not what we're created to be. We're not living into the divine image that God has hoped for us and made us for. Instead, we've terribly defaced the image of God in ourselves and in others because of sin. So when Christ comes to be with us, he finds us as something that's much less than what he intended for us to be. But that doesn't thwart God's purposes, does it? Just because he finds us to be horribly defaced and horribly disfigured, he doesn't start all over again. Just as we have seen time and again in the pages of the Old Testament, God got frustrated with his people, but he never started over with a new Israel. He stayed with his people, and he stays with us. And so it is that the way God's purposes are brought to bear through the fidelity of Jesus is that God transforms human relationships from the inside out. So even though we were created in the image of Christ by the breath of God at creation, and even though we've deformed that creation through sin, God is faithful to us to raise us from the muck into which we've fallen. Born to raise us from the earth, born to give us second birth. Those lovely lines from the hymn paint an image of God as one who, like an instrument maker, has fashioned a beautiful violin only to come back later and find this instrument lying in the mud and the dirt trampled on. And instead of just saying, "Oh, I'm just gonna go out and get a new one," God is like a master luthier. An instrument maker, an instrument repairman, always finds material of like age and density and workmanship. You replace and repair like with like. And that's what God did with us. When God in Jesus Christ became human, it was like a repair from the inside, replacing and restoring the material that was damaged from within, using the original instrument to make music again. Christ's body has been born in our midst so that we can be born again into the life of God. He created us once and gave us birth. And now he raises us from the earth a second time, a new birth, a second birth. So what difference does all this heavy theology make? We sing it, and we may understand it a little bit better after this sermon, maybe a little bit. But how do we go live all of this? What difference does it make for us? Well, I think the difference that Christ makes is that he shows us and empowers us and makes possible for us to be truly human. That what Christ does is not gives us a list of truths that we assent to. He doesn't just give us a new frame of mind or feeling in the interior of our life, but he actually changes something by being with us, by being within us. And if Christ shows us what it means to be human, then that means that if his life has spilled over into ours, then we're going to be a different kind of person. We're going to be a different kind of people. So, for instance, if Christ lays his glory to the side for our sakes, doesn't that mean that we will be able to lay our glory to the side for the sake of others? That we won't be the kind of people who are always having to get their own way all the time, always making sure that things are done their way, to their glory, to their benefit and honor, that they're constantly living in the eyes of others? No. Christ comes, and in laying his glory by, he raises us to his glory. He gives us something that we didn't have. Not only that we didn't have, that we were actively working against, but if we see that in Jesus, if we receive that, if our hearts and our lives are expanded by the fact of Jesus being in us, then we're empowered to live a different way. We can lay our glory by and think of others as better than ourselves, helping others get ahead, not forcing our own way all the time. The second thing I think it means to have a Christ formed and renewed humanity is that if it's true that at every stage of his life, Jesus chose to change things from the inside of human beings, from the inner part of our hearts. He didn't come to make sure that the Democrats or the Republicans were elected. He didn't come to depose Caesar or to dethrone Herod. He didn't work from the outside. He worked from the inside. He didn't even believe this or not. He didn't come to merely change your behavior. He came to change your heart. And if he's truly changed our hearts, then our behavior follows. Jesus is not about behavior modification. He's about the wholesale transformation of the heart. And so if he does that from within who we are, who we really are, then what does that say about our willingness to stick with who we are? Think about that. Just stay with me just for a second here. Sometimes I think that we believe that our faith, religious, all the religious stuff we do, is kind of like a glorified New Year's resolution. Like if I could only lose 5 pounds, if I could only have better work-life balance, if I could only run a little bit more, I need to call my aunt once a week. She really depends on me. I need this. The gospel is not that. It's not God up there with a list of all these things you need to be doing, all these things that you're not. God up there waiting for you to get to heaven so he can check up on you and make sure that you've done everything you were supposed to do. No, the glory and the mystery and the beauty of the incarnation is that God comes to work on us, on you, on me from within, from where we are, who we are right now. That's a really hard thing to accept. It's really hard to just sit there and let God love you just like you are right now. But in fact, that's what he wants to do. He wants to transform you from within, starting today, starting from where you are right now. And you have to be honest about that. You have to be open about that. And if God comes to work from within us as we truly are, that leads to another conclusion about what it means to be a human being. Because it means that we will work with people where they are, with who they are. And boy, oh boy, that's hard, right? I mean, so much of this kind of religiosity mindset can turn us into a niggling busybody, minding other people and trying to modify their behavior. But that's not what the incarnation was. God was pleased as man to dwell with us as human beings. He enjoyed it. And we have to ask ourselves, do we enjoy the people that God put us in the church with? I mean, we all have the people that we enjoy, that we sort of make a point to go be around those people. But then you think about something like the church, where you don't necessarily get to pick who you go to church with, and you have to ask yourself, are you pleased to be in church with the people that you're in church with? Or how about your family? Are you pleased to be with your family around the holidays, or do they drive you nuts? Well, the promise of the gospel this morning is not just that you can go along to get along, or that you can mind your P's and Q's, or keep your mouth shut when Uncle Raymond brings up politics at the dinner table. The promise of the gospel is that you can actually have a heart that has been enlarged and that is pleased to be with other people. And I don't know about you, I cling to that promise that the one who was pleased to dwell with me in all of my mistakes and faults and shortcomings and sin, that same one can make me more like him. And that is a treasure to me, because I want to be pleased to live with other people. I want to dwell with my family out of joy and pleasure, and be with everyone that I meet in the same way. And the gospel says you can have that. You can actually become a different person than you are right now. And it's not about losing 5 pounds. It's not about your New Year's resolutions. Those all might be good. You probably do need to lose 5 pounds after all that chocolate divinity you ate. But that's beside the point. What really matters is the state of your heart. What really matters is not what you're about to do for God in the new year. It's what God has already done for you in the person of Jesus Christ. He's already made it happen. So trim the hearth and set the table. Make your house as fair as you're as able. And try to be of good cheer. Try to live into the hope that God has already done this in you, that the light that has come into the world will not be shrouded in darkness, no matter who's the president or no matter who wins this Senate race. It's already happened in Jesus Christ. We already have everything we need to dwell with other human beings in peace and in love and in all of the things that we talk about around this joyous Christmas season. We already have it. So we have a few days left of the official Christmas season. Be of good cheer. Say yes to things. Take time to go for a walk. Give the kids extra treats. Hum a song. Even one of those old boozy mid-century Perry Como or Burl Ives songs. Have a holly jolly Christmas. And if you find yourself humming a little too loud as you go about the house, well, so much the better. Christ has come to be with you exactly as you are. And what a promise that portends for the future. God bless you. Merry Christmas.